It's preparing to stream the meeting, so give it a moment. And we should be able to get this going. All right. Okay, done. Okay, very good. Let's see. It's coming up. All right. Okay, welcome everybody. Oh, hang on. I can hear myself, so all right, hang on a second. Okay, I had to get rid of that. Okay, great. We're getting this technology worked out. Welcome everybody to the virtual Beit Midrash of Keshet Yehuda, and we have a fabulous crew here. We're doing this in the memory of Mendel Miriam Bat Chaya Bracha, and she should have an Aliyah in Shemaim with all the rest of the tzaddikim up there. And we're going to welcome Rabbi Dwek from the UK. Now, interesting enough, you don't seem to have a UK accent. Is there some reason for that?
Yes, it's because I didn't grow up here.
Okay. Where are you from?
I grew up in Los Angeles.
Oh,
yeah,
where?
I live. Sorry.
Where in Los Angeles?
Around the Fairfax area.
Okay, I'm from Venice Beach.
Oh, is that right?
That's nice. Right. That's how I have my English accent.
I got
so,
yeah.
All right.
But I've been living here for the last 6 years.
Ah, wonderful. So we want to welcome you, and we're looking forward. What's the title of your shiur? And I'm going to leave it to you. Again, if all you folks, if you that are here today, please, if you have a question, just put it in the chat or raise your hand. I will do my best to get the Rob's attention. And when he calls on you, or he might have some times within the shiur, he'll ask for questions, and we'll just do it one at a time. And when you're finished, please, if you could just remute yourself so we can keep it nice and clean. All right. Thank you very much. And take it away, Rabbi Dwek.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm first of all, I want to mention Avi Levy, and I want to thank Avi for reaching out and asking me to do this. He's a member of our community, and we're very, very proud that he's there, and there's Israel, and all of the wonderful limud that he's doing, and the path that he's taking. And so him and his friends and everybody, I want to thank very much. Thank you, Rabbi Abraham, for this opportunity. What I want to do today, for this shiur, is really just to read through a Rambam. I mean, it sounds simple, but it's a very interesting Rambam. And I think that it has something to do with the time. Although I'm going to say, before we get into it, it is important to kind of understand, I'm using this Rambam only as a template, as an arrow, if you will, in terms of kind of pointing us into a particular mindset and direction, which could, if it's not looked at carefully, could get to be a bit misunderstood. But I do think first what we should do is we should just look at the Rambam at its face value, and we have to look at what is the context within which it's speaking, and then maybe we can have a bit of a discussion outside of it in order to be able to consider its implications. So this Rambam is the opening of Hilchot Ta'anit, the halachot of fasts. And the thing about the Rambam is, if you're familiar, Rambam, he bases his entire Mishneh Torah, the whole of the book, on mitzvot from the Torah, right? One of what we would call mitzvot deoraita, the mitzvot of the Torah, of which there are 613. And he bases the entire book on those mitzvot and develops the halachot from the mitzvot of the Torah. Now, there are some mitzvot that we have that the Hachamim established, that the rabbis established for us, that are not necessarily directly rooted in the mitzvot of the Torah. And so what the Rambam usually does is he takes the mitzvah of the Torah that relates to whatever it is that the Hachamim established, and he connects them. And that's kind of what it is that he does over here. He opens the law of fasts with a very interesting mitzvah of the Torah, which seemingly has nothing to do per se with fasts. But the Rambam nonetheless saw this mitzvah as the source for any time that we have a situation that is distressing or worrying or concerning for us, and how it is that we're supposed to respond. So in normal circumstances, the Hachamim said, listen, we should fast, given if the circumstances meet particular criteria, then the way that we deal with distressing situations is that we fast. But the Torah does not ask us to do that. The Torah asks us to do something else. And that is the mitzvah that he begins with over here. And I will say before we get into it that the circumstances for the mitzvah that we are going to read no longer apply to us, unfortunately. The circumstances in which the mitzvah that we will read apply is when Israel, when the nation of Israel is unified and sovereign in Eretz Israel under the law of Torah. And although we are coming close, we're not 100% there yet. And so this mitzvah does not necessarily apply in its full extent, but it is meant to be the way that we run when we are full, unified, and intact and sovereign under the law of Torah. And he says as follows, in the first halakha, and you can take a look over here. I don't know if you see my screen. I'm putting the cursor right under the first word, mitzvat, aseh min Torah. There is a positive commandment of the Torah, liz'ok ulhariya b'hatzotzrot, al kol tzara shetavo al hatzibur. The Torah requires the nation of Israel to sound trumpets, essentially to sound alarm trumpets, anytime that there are distressing or concerning situations that befall the nation. Now, how do we know this? It says in the pasuk in Bamidbar, Perek Yud, pasuk Tet, Al Hatzar Hatzoreretchem v'Hareotem b'Hatzotzrot. Anytime that you have distressing situations, that's tsar. The word tsar literally means confining, right? So you feel oppressed, or you feel confined by something, or pushed down by something, then sound the trumpets, sound the alarms. And that the Rambam then says, klomar, that is to say, kol davar sheyatzer lachem, anything that causes you distress of significance, kegon, for example, batzoret, if there is hunger, or dever, or if there is plague, or arbe, or there is a plague of locusts, v'chayotze bahen, or anything like that, za'aku alehen v'hariu, sound the alarms. Okay, so that's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is problems occur, sound the alarms. That's the mitzvah. Now the Rambam wants to explain the mitzvah, and he wants to try and give context for it. Why is this mitzvah a mitzvah? And he proposes a reason over here, and that's over here in the second halakha, which begins v'davar zeh, right? He says v'davar zeh, this idea of sounding the alarms, midarkei hatshuvahu. This is among the pathways to teshuvah. Because at a time where there is distress and there is some level of oppression, even if it is not by other people, it's just by the circumstances of the world, what these things do, what the sounding of the alarms do, is they bring consciousness to people. Yid'u hakol shebiglal ma'asehem hara'im hura lahen. Everybody will know that these things are occurring because we have failed in terms of our actions and the way that we're living. Now I'm going to pause here because this is dangerous, right? Now, what does it mean we failed in terms of our actions and the way that we're living? First of all, we have to remember that what we're talking about over here is the entirety of the nation of Israel, all unified and sovereign under the law of Torah. And in that situation, the nature of responsiveness between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, between God and the people of Israel, is extreme, right? It's constantly engaging between one and the other, where God and the people of Israel are always engaging with one another, and there is information and communication that is running between the two. And so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says here, I want there to be signals to the nation, so that if there is a sense of mishap, or there is misstep, right? What is a misstep, right? Where you miss the mark, right? Bnei Israel maybe should be doing one thing, they're doing something else, or they should be focusing on something and they're not focusing on this. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses the world as a mode of communication, right? Very important to see that, right? He uses the world and life as a mode of communication. We're meant to see this as a signal that we should be aware, that we need to look in and take a look at our own lives, and to be able to question how it is that we can better the things that we're doing, so that we don't run into a quietness of mind or a lack of recognition of mind in terms of how it is that we're living our lives. So he basically says that the alarms are to do exactly what alarms do, and that is to wake us up. Right? We should pay attention that, if the alarms are sounding, that means that what's going on is not just something strange or odd that's going on. It's something that should prompt us to look in and see how it is that we can address our own behavior. And then he continues and he says, and we're over here with aval im lo yizaku, right? He says, aval im lo yizaku velo yariu. If, however, we do not sound alarms at difficult situations that occur to us, yomru davar ze miminhag haolam ira lanu. We will say instead that this is just a fluke, that whatever bad is going on is a fluke. It's just some random occurrence that's going on in the world. Tzarazo nikra nikret. It's random. Literally what nikret means in that sense is from the word keri, which means just happenstance. It's just random. And people will tend to say that the difficult things that go on in life are simply random. And what the Rambam is saying over here is that in this context, when Bnei Israel are unified and they are sovereign under law of Torah, things are not random. That the way that Israel lives in the world is always in constant communication with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if there are difficulties going on or hardships going on, it's because it's something that's calling us to attention and something that we need to be able to look at. Then he says something astonishing. He says, Harezo, to live in a world this way. And in which way? In thinking that basically everything that goes on in the world is purely random, and that this is just the crazy things that happen in the universe. Harezo derech achzaryut. It is a way of cruelty. That's what the word achzar means in Hebrew. And it's important to kind of recognize that this word achzar is built of two smaller words, ach and zar, which the word ach means only, and zar means strange. And it's basically saying that it's a way of living a life in which we say everything is strange. In what sense? It's saying that the world really doesn't touch me. It doesn't have intimate connection with me. It's not something that has anything to do or interweaves with my life. There is a random world out there, and then there's me, and I don't have interaction with it. It's strange for all intents and purposes to me. Why does that word, achzar, mean cruel? Because in order to be able to be kind and caring and compassionate, a person needs to be able to see others with from a personal perspective. A person needs to be able to feel the pain of others. A person needs to be able to feel the difficulty and suffering of others. And how do we do that? We don't live in their bodies. We don't have their experiences. The only way that we do that is to be able to imagine what it would be like for us to be in their circumstance. And if we have the capacity to be able to have that relatedness, right, that connection to people and feel what they feel and experience in a certain way, what it is that they experience, it saves us from callousness and cruelty, or what we would call in Hebrew, achzariyut, where the world basically is just strange and foreign to us. And so what are we saying with regards to living a life of cruelty by seeing the world as a random place? What it's saying is this, and I think that this is the crux of what it is that Harambam is trying to put out in these halachot, and then I will share what I think is important for us to kind of keep in mind during this time. And that is that there are two ways in which we can live in the world. We can either live in the world as though, yes, the world is completely blind and random. It is a cold world in which there is no interaction and relationship to us really and sensitivity to our lives. Or we can live our lives in a way in which we see the world as being powered by God, and that the source of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that God's presence, that his being, that his, for lack of a better term, his energy, runs through the entire world and leads the world. And if we see that as being true, and I think there's no question about the fact that as far as Torah is concerned, and as far as Yisrael is concerned, we've always looked at the world that way, then we see the world as being a place that is potentially warm. That, and I'll explain why I say potentially, that the world can be a place, and indeed, as far as the Torah is concerned, should be a place in which we feel the world and life as it manifests for us as a communication to us, as something that we can always learn from, that we can essentially look at our lives as a class. And our lives are very much meant to be seen as a class from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as an always teaching opportunity. And so that is very much what the Rambam is saying over here. The Rambam is saying it's not just when things go bad. He goes, when things go bad, then we need to be able to remember that life is a class, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks to us through life. And that if things are going difficult, in a difficult way for us, especially if it's Klal Yisrael, unified, sovereign, under Torah law, then those things don't just happen. Those things are communication from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the point is to be able to wake up and to pay attention to our lives and to constantly question how it is that we're living. What we call this in English is self-examination, that we look at our lives and examine our lives and question, am I living in the best way that I can live? And are my deeds and actions and is the way that I spend my time the best way that it can be? And in what capacity am I prepared or able to make it better? But the general idea over here, especially in this third halakha, is that to live in a way in which the world is completely indifferent to us, right? And where the world basically runs with us as though our lives and the things that occur in it make no difference whatsoever. Harambam is saying that that is a cruel way to live. And it's a cruel way to live because in order to be able to save ourselves from cruelty, we need to be able to see a connection that we have in the world around us. We need to be able to see a connection that we have between us and the people around us so that we can learn compassion and empathy. But we also need to be able to feel and know that the world and life as it runs for us is not just some arbitrary run that has nothing to do with our lives, that it is powered by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that his spirit runs through all of it. And that being that is the case, if we wish to open ourselves to it, if we wish to listen to it, if we wish to be able to live in what we would call responsiveness to it, then we can live our life as though our lives are classes for us, that our lives teach us and give us opportunities always to be able to hear and pay attention and think as to what it is that is happening to our lives, and is there anything here that is waking me up to pay attention to how it is that things are going. So one could say, well, I mean, how do we know? How do we figure that out? How are we supposed to figure out and know what it is that's going on? It's not always easy, but it's not always that difficult either. Because if we do live our lives in a way in which the basic foundation for us is we want to live best as we possibly can, that the foundation for our lives is I want to live the best version of my life that I can, and that I am willing to be open in my heart and my mind to be able to hear from life itself what it is that it can teach me about how it is that I can live better and stronger. Then what it does is it opens us up and it saves us from callousness. It gives us an opportunity to be able to hear from the outside what it is that we can do in order to be able to live the best life that we can live, and to save ourselves from kind of falling asleep and just figuring that the world is what it is and it doesn't have anything to do with us. And I think that is a very important lesson, because it's saying to us, the Torah is teaching us that we should live our lives and experience the things that happen to us in the world as a class, as something that we can learn from and be aware of, rather than just feeling as though it just runs and it has nothing to do with us and the lives that we live. And that's something that the Rambam is pointing out over here, that we shouldn't look at things that way, as just happenstance. And so there's a big question in terms of, what about when things happen like this in the world that are so massive and happening to so many people, like the coronavirus that all of us are dealing with right now, and that, you all have to come to Shiur on a virtual platform because we can't, sit together and spend time together in a real bit midrash, Well, I don't think that any one of us could simply say, well, this is the reason that it's happening, or this is what's going on and why, the world is going through all of this. But I don't think that that's the point. I don't think that we all need to be able to say, this is the reason that things are happening. I think what it is that we need to do is to be able to say, well, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what's happening to me in my life. And this is what's happening to my friends and my family in our lives. And what can I take from this and learn in order to be able to better myself? That is always an important and valuable way to be able to live. So you don't have to be the Navi in order to be able to stand up in the prophet, right? In order to be able to stand up and say, well, this is the reason that God has brought coronavirus onto the world. That's not what the Rambam is saying over here, and it's not necessarily what it is that we should do. What it is that we can do is in terms of our own lives, in terms of our own experience, is to be able to say, well, what is the experience of this for me? What is this bringing out for me? I'll tell you some of the things that people share with me that is bringing out for them. I've been giving shiur every night online. And last night, one of the questions that people asked, actually more than one person asked the question, they said, Rabbi, how are we supposed to keep from going crazy being alone in the house all day? And to me, that's one of these points. Well, I don't know. It's interesting that we have tremendous difficulty in being able to be present with ourselves alone without any distraction or something else to do. Why is that? How many of us, think about it, how many of us are able to sit in quiet for more than 5 minutes at a time? 5 minutes is a long time. Without without being on our phone, without listening to music, without watching something, without taking a walk, without speaking to other people, how many of us are able to be present in our own company without all of the distractions that we constantly involve ourselves in, and be able to be with ourselves in our own company? It's much harder than people think it might be. And it's something that we are kind of being forced to do right now on various levels, right? If it's not being alone with yourself, it's being able to be home and say, okay, well, I've been on my phone, I've been on my email, I've watched how many hours of Netflix, I've done my learning, I've spent time with the family, now what? And then it's not just today, it's next day, next day, next day, next day, next day. So then the question is, well, what do I want to do now that I have opportunities to take to be able to look at my life and do the best that I can with my life, and to be able to build myself? Is there things that I want to study? Are there things that I want to know? Are there books that I want to read? All of those things are things that we can look at this and be able to say, something, it's not just that this crazy thing is a fluke and it's coming to us. That's derech achzariyut, says the Rambam. That is a cruel way of living. Why? Because it means that the world and what's going on with it has absolutely nothing to do with me, and I can just carry on and hunker down until it's done. And what the Rambam is saying is, as a principle over here, is that that's not true. The things that happen in the world have to do with us, and they come as a class to teach us. And the question is not for us in our situation, why is this happening on a global level? The question for us is, what can I learn from this? Hear the world speaking to me as HaKadosh Baruch Hu talking through it, and work on in my own life and take advantage of this situation in order to be able to see what lessons I've learned. And the truth of the matter is, if we are honest with ourselves, in every single hardship, in every single difficulty, there is always lessons that we learn that we otherwise would never be able to learn. Because when everything is running smoothly and nicely and everything is, all the way that we expect it is supposed to be, our minds kind of run because we're just used to how it is that things run. And we don't think about alternative situations. We don't think about, alternative realities that we would otherwise need to be able to consider when things aren't running the way that they normally run. And sometimes it requires those kinds of realities in order for us to be able to entertain ideas, to engage in introspection that we otherwise would not necessarily engage in. So I've been speaking a lot. I don't know if anybody has any questions or if it's been too much to digest, but I'll pause if you'd like to hear if there is anything. If not, you can tell me.
Guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and just raise your hand or chat it in that you'd like to speak, and Rob Dwek will be happy to answer your questions. Avi Levi made one little comment earlier about when you were talking about the sound of the trumpets. He says, like rocket sirens nowadays.
Yeah, exactly right. Those are the azakot, 100%. 100%. Yeah. But these things were not just to take cover. These things were really to start getting everybody to realize, wait a minute, things have shifted. We've got to pay attention. But absolutely, the rocket sirens are the stand-ins for the Chatzotzrot today.
Okay, so if no one else has any questions at this point, then feel free to go forward.
Yeah. So the Rambam then develops this. The Rambam then develops this into fasts. And he says that's the reason why we have fasts. And I think that that's also important as a side point. Now, I don't know how many people are fasting now, or if there is, such a thing. And I'm not advocating and saying that that's what we need to do at the moment at all. And we need our immune systems to be strong. What is the concept of a fast? And the Rambam writes that the concept of a fast is in order to be able to awaken us and to be able to keep us conscious. So I'll show you that. I'll bring this up for you. He writes that with regards to the fasts, that we fast the entire nation. He says this. He says, Yesh sham yamim shekol Yisrael mit'anim bahem mibnei atzarot she'er'u bahem. He says there are days that all of Israel fasts, right? There are days that everybody fasts on. And he says the reason for it is that what are those fasts that he's talking about? Sheva Asar B'Tammuz and Asara B'Tevet and Tisha B'Av and Tzom Gedalia and so on. He says, why do we do this? He says the reason that we do this is Yezeh Zikaron Le'Ma'asenu Hara'im U'Ma'aseh Abotenu Shaya K'Ma'asenu Ata. So he says about those fasts, and it's very similar to what he said at the beginning of the halachot, that it needs to be a zikaron, that the fast itself is there in order to be able to provide memory, to provide remembering, for ma'asenu hara'im u'ma'aseh abotenu shaya k'ma'asenu ata, right? For those particular fasts, which we continue to fast every year, he says it's not only the things that we've done wrong, but the things that our forefathers had done wrong that hasn't changed in all of this time. But the point that I want to highlight over here is the fact that he says Yezeh zikaron le'ma'asenu hara'im. How is the fast supposed to be a zikaron for ma'asenu hara'im, right? But it's meant to be in the same way that the alarms are supposed to be a zikaron for ma'asenu hara'im.
Rabbi, one second here. Avi Levi has a question. He says, do you think we should call a fast for the is that klal?
For the klal?
Kahal. He said kahal for the klal. That's he's asking.
I don't think that we should call a fast at this time, and I'll tell you why. Right now, number one, everybody needs to be at optimal health, and our immune systems need to be strong. And one of the things that we need for our immune system to be strong is good health and nourishment. Fasts at this point for that are not advisable. Aside from that, we also need people to be able to have their strength, because there's a lot to do right now. I mean, there's a lot of help that people need, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, although it's surprising. You'd think that nobody's doing any work, but I mean, I've been working harder now than I have in the last 2 weeks just to make sure that, support is there, and that we have systems for volunteering and all of that during this time. And people need strength. So people need to eat. I think more than fasting at this point is prayer. And I do think that, unfortunately, because, synagogues are closed. I mean, you don't have minyan? I imagine that you don't have minyan at this time, or do you? Are you having no minyanim? So, we have to be able to use our prayer time very special, and it's a wonderful time to be able to say, okay, listen, I may not be praying for an hour. I'm going to pray for a shorter amount of time, or maybe even a longer amount of time, depending on your own capacity. But it's very important to take this time to be able to really focus on your prayers to God and to speak to God. And that is the zikaron. That's what the Rambam is saying over here, that we are conscious, that we talk to him about our family, that we talk to him about what it is that we hope for the world and how it is that we hope that this ultimately will develop. That's essential. So I think aside from fasting, I don't think fasting here is what we need to do at the moment. But that's why I'm pointing out the Rambam's fasting is not suffering. It's very important to realize that. The Rambam's point of fasting has nothing to do with suffering and deprivation and hardship. The Rambam's point of suffering of fasting is to be able to keep our minds about things. How does fasting do that? Because if you're not having lunch and you're not having breakfast, then you're wondering why. And you always realize that there's something that's going on. And that's the point. That's why, by the way, Chazal always ask us not to eat before they want us to do a mitzvah that they're worried about that we'll forget. Anytime that there's any worry that we're going to forget something, they all say, be careful, be careful. Don't eat before you say kiddush. Don't eat before you search for chametz. Don't eat before you light the nerot Chanukah. Don't eat before you daven mincha. All of those things are there. They use food in order to be able to keep our minds aware of things, because it's the eating that keeps us on our regular systems. And when we don't eat, we remember always, why it is that we're not. So it's always food that helps us do that. But in this current situation, I don't think that fasting is the way to go. I think that prayer is a very valuable thing. I think we should make tremendous efforts in terms of being able to help us with that. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
What's that?
On the issue of weddings, what would you tell people who want to get married? Who scheduled it for, let's say, this week? What are they supposed to do?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question because we really don't like to postpone weddings. And usually we need to be able to have a minyan in order for it to be able to do the Birkat Nisuin, so that we should be able to say the Sheva Brachot together. I would say in whatever capacity we can that weddings shouldn't be postponed per se, but if you can, to do them outdoors, so that they're not held in closed, confined circumstances. And if you can do it with minyan, then do it. Otherwise, I would say, if there are no extenuating if there are no other opportunities to be able to get people together in a way that's safe, then it should wait until that opportunity presents itself. But pikuach nefesh takes precedent over everything else. And this is a serious pikuach nefesh situation. I don't think people properly appreciate that, because even if we as young people are not as vulnerable, we don't feel as vulnerable, we pass it on from person to person. And I already know 2 people that have died from our own broader community because of coronavirus. And I know 4 other people that are in hospital that are in critical condition. So it's not a joke. We have to be very careful with it.
Avi has a question. Avi, you want to unmute?
Oh no, that was from the last question. But okay. we have one of the boys ourselves in our mechina that has a corona, Mr. Saddam Brino.
Yeah, you've got to be very careful. Please God, he'll be able to be, he'll pull through it and all will be okay. But you definitely got to be careful. All of us have to be very careful. In any case, I think that this is it's an unprecedented time, as everybody's been saying. There's no question about it. But it is an extremely powerful time, and where all of our shigra, as we say, right, our normal, usual activity is being turned on its head. And any time that our normal activity has been turned on its head, especially to the degree that it is now, there's no synagogue, Kriyat Torah, even Pesach, who knows what's going to be with that? It requires us to question what is at the core of who we are, and what do we draw from at our core in order to be able to move through these things. So it requires us to be able to look at not, when Pesach is not just, what it is that I normally do, how, the tunes that I use or the synagogue, that I go to and so on and so forth, but what's at the core of Pesach to me? What does it mean to me, ultimately in its essence? I'm sorry.
We have another question from Ovadia. Ovadia, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
I lost it.
Okay, so actually going back to Ephraim's question about weddings. So you mentioned the Sheva Brachot, and I was wondering, why do we have that in the first place? And secondly, because of the situation, couldn't we go back to what we did in the olden days, where we simply took the bride into a room and then we had to eat him outside? We said, okay, you've now been in there long enough, you're considered married,
Yeah, we don't do that.
Simple to the point.
I understand the question. Thank God we have not devolved to the point in where we have to throw all the mitzvot de Rabbanan out the window, which is essentially what it is that you would be suggesting. What you're suggesting is a din Torah. And Chazal established certain developments with that and certain structures to that we do not just toss because of the current situation. There are extenuating circumstances, and there are things that we need to be able to respond with. But it doesn't mean that we have to just devolve halakha to the point of its core essentials in order to be able to keep it. So God forbid, I hope that it won't get to that kind of a point. But yes, to your point, I will say we need to be innovative, right? There are situations where we need to be able to say, something, at this time, there may be things that we normally wouldn't allow, or that we normally wouldn't say, we think should be done, that we're nonetheless allowing or that we're opening for consideration, yes, I think that definitely things like that need to be done. But that's why you need scholarship, because you need a Talmid Chacham to be able to know where everything lies, what is Deoraita, what's the Rabbanan, what's a Minhag, and how it is that those things manifest with each other in Halacha. And so we don't just cut away at things without kind of realizing what it is that we're cutting away, what we're cutting away at. Does that make sense? It's important. I want to hear if you understand what I'm saying. Do you get what I'm saying?
So I hear, but you didn't answer my first question, which is
what
why do we have the Sheva Brachot? Why do we have that? What does it do?
The Sheva Brachot
that we're getting.
The Sheva Brachot are part of what we call chuppah, right? And so Sheva Brachot are the brachot that we say, which is the second part of the marriage ceremony, in which the Chatan brings the Kala into his house, into his home. And the chuppah acts as that. And so we do the Sheva Brachot as part of that, because what used to happen was we would do the Irusin, the engagement, a year ahead, and then we would do the Nisuin later. We still can do that. It's not that we don't have a halachic opportunity to do that. We don't do it because people got in a lot of trouble by doing that. Because, once you're betrothed, you're not allowed to be with anybody else. And people got stuck sometimes. So that's not something that we want to open the door for. It's not something that we want to start tampering with if we don't have the requirement or necessity to tamper with it. So we like to keep everything the way that it normally is set up to be, unless there's serious reason not to have it that way. So yes, I will say, if it means that a person should get married and we need to wait or have a delay for the Nisuin, then yeah, that might be something that we have to entertain. But I think it's easier to get married outside, or in a wider area, so that those things don't come into play, and we're able to do things kalacha as necessary without having to worry about it. Does that make sense? No.
I think so.
Well, why don't you tell me what you think? What is the impetus for your question? I'm asking because I think it's an important question, and the reason why I'm asking you is because I want to hear what's underlying the question. What are you thinking on your own?
When I say Sheva Brachot, if you want to say, I'm not talking about the minyan after the meal. I'm talking about
No, I know you're talking about at the ceremony under the chuppah.
No, not that. Not
Then
that.
what?
I'm talking like afterwards. What do you call it?
Oh, you're talking about like the week long of Sheva Brachot?
Yeah, that.
Well, what? That's okay. If you don't have people together, you don't say Sheva Brachot. I thought you were talking about the actual section of the ceremony, because you were talking about why don't we do in the old days a person, was alone in a room with Eidim. So I figured you were talking about the actual Kiddushin.
No, that's part of the actual thing.
Okay.
I was talking
All
about
right. No. So then the Sheva Brachot. Listen, that's Sheva Brachot is circumstantial, right? There's no mitzvah to have a seudah in order to be able to say the Sheva Brachot. The Sheva Brachot is to be said in the circumstance that we have a seudah and there's the right people and the right situation and circumstance. Then you say Sheva Brachot. You follow?
Okay.
Right? So people create the situation so that we can say Sheva Brachot. But it's not a chiyuv to create the situation in order to say Sheva Brachot. You follow?
Interesting. Okay. So in other words, in this day and age, if we were to have a wedding, essentially it would be permissible to simply get 10 men, have the Kiddushin, have the Nisuin, we have the first Sheva Brachot, and then we go on and say you're married.
Correct.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. With that, Rav,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to sign off. I
Well,
apologize.
Avi had one
we
more
have another question.
Yeah,
Okay,
from
go
Avi.
ahead. Question. Last question.
One more question about Pesach for now Beseder, when some people are going to be with like 2 people.
Yeah.
In quarantine. What's going on with that?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
A lot of people have been asking me about this. And look, I will only say my opinion, but I'm not saying this la halacha. I think that you're going to have to probably ask an authority over there. But people have been asking if it's permitted to kind of have FaceTime on, if you have it ahead of time, if you keep it on before before the Yom Tov, or if you have somehow a timer before the Yom Tov to be able to have it, whether that's permissible to do it. Is that what you're asking about, or you're just asking?
Yeah. In that sense,
I am
would that
of
be
the
permitted
opinion.
or-
I am of the opinion that the entire FaceTime thing, the whole video chat thing, is an isur at best. It's an isur de Rabbanan. And in this situation, there's no question to me. Again, I'm sure that there are going to be poskim who disagree with this, but there's no question to me that in this situation it would be permitted, as long as it's not done by you actively on Yom Tov. If you have a way to be able to set it up before Yom Tov, then just sitting and having it broadcast, then it's mutar, because it is, it's definitely a shavut, and it's a b'makom mitzvah. And in this situation, and there's no question in my mind that it's a mitzvah, especially for the seder, that there should be simchat Yom Tov, because it will be quite depressing for many people. And there's a mitzvah of simchat Yom Tov, that if it can be set up ahead of time, or I would say, I don't know that this is the case in Israel, it's probably not so likely, but if you had a non-Jew that was able to put it for you or to set it up for you, even on the Yom Tov, that would also be permitted to do for the seder. But to do it yourself on the Yom Tov for the Seder, that I can't say is mutar. But to set it up ahead of time, or to ask a goy to do it for you on the Yom Tov, is permitted, because it's a shvut m'kom mitzvah.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. I wish all of you strength, briut, hatzlacha in your limudim, and chizuk through all of this. I'm very proud of all of you. I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to share with you. And B'ezrat Hashem, maybe we'll do it again.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much, Rabbi. Yes, thank you
Thank
for
you,
coming,
Rob.
and we would love to have you on again. We're planning
It
on
would be an honor and
continuing this on,
pleasure.
and hopefully you'll come to us in person, and
Ken Yiratzon.
you and your family will be moving here soon, and we'll be all dancing together at the Beit
Ken
HaMikdash.
Yiratzon, amen. Ken Yiratzon.
All right.
All
Thank you,
right,
everybody, for
awesome.
coming.
Shabbat shalom. Bye-bye.
Shabbat shalom.